Welcome back. I'm Candace Savanen. I'm a data scientist and your main instructor for this course. In this chapter, we're going to talk about automating rerunning analyses, which is kind of a lot of what we're trying to do here as scientists who might be doing data analysis and using GitHub Actions. This is the licensing information for this course. All right, what are we going to do in this chapter? We're going to demonstrate how to set up an action that can rerun your analysis. We're going to use a Docker image for a GitHub action workflow, and we're going to set up a basic set of scripts and file organization for reproducibility purposes. So, as a reminder, we want to use rerunning analyses because we want to be able to catch problems early. Okay, we want to know if our data analysis results have changed, and if they did, why did they change? Having that kind of alert and consistency is great for reproducibility purposes. So this is an example of a rerunning analysis that we're going to dive into in this chapter. We will walk through it right now. Okay, at the very top, we see that there's our trigger. So there's the on, and in this case, we can see that this is going to run anytime we file a pull request, but we have some additional qualifiers. We have some additional qualifications here that we also are only going to run this when the branches that the pull request is filed to are called main or staging. Okay, so only for those types of pull requests. If we wanted it to run for any pull request, we would delete this line 7 here and we would just stick with pull request. But in this case, we're only going to run this for a main or staging targeted pull request. Okay, now below here, we can see we have jobs, right? This job we're calling rerun, and we are naming this rerun analysis. That makes sense. Okay, we are going to run this on Ubuntu, but not exactly, because we can't just use Ubuntu for this analysis. We need some Python, we need some R. So instead, we're running it on Ubuntu, but then we can see below this, we are calling a container, and that container is going to be spun up from this image that is from, we've developed this image as our group as part of the data science lab. And so that is what we're calling here, and we're going to run this. So we're going to need more than just what's the base image for Ubuntu. We're going to need to run a container and an image to get the R and the Python that we need. All right, below here we can see that we have the steps that we're going to run. We are borrowing some steps from the GitHub Actions marketplace. So we can this first step is called checkout files. So checkout files is going to be a very common action you're probably going to need for nearly all of your GitHub Actions, if I were to guess. So what that means is we're going to pull any files from our branch on this pull request. We're going to, by default, we pick the branch from the pull request, but we could also set it to pull some other branch if we wanted to. But we are going to want to pull all those files so that we can use them for some kind of step, right? It would make sense then why you would want to use this action a lot, because let's say we want to test the developments of the code that we just did. We want to test new features. We want to, whatever. We're going to need to make sure that we have those files. So by default, you don't just have the files. You have to do this checkout action. All right. So that's the first part. Okay. And then the next part is when we're actually running the analysis. So in this mock analysis, we have set it up so that the whole analysis is able to be rerun by calling a single script. I highly recommend doing something like this where you have kind of a main script that calls any other scripts and in the right order that you need to rerun your analysis. This makes it very easy for somebody to reproduce your results, because if they only have to do one step, then it's a lot easier than having to do, 100 steps or even 5 steps. It would be easier, right? All right, and then, but this last part is we're starting to get a little into some more advanced weeds here on the last step, okay? So here's the thing. If that step where we're calling the script, the run analysis.sh script, if it fails, it is not the default behavior of GitHub Actions to stop the job or tell us that it failed. Sometimes it will, but in the case of a bash script, it often does not. So if we want to know if the script did not actually fully complete, if it stopped early or failed for any reason or had an error, we are going to need to do something a little special at the end. So that is what this last part is for. So this last part, we're going to check in on how that last step ran. So you can see we have an if statement, So we are pulling a variable. We're going to talk about variables soon, so you'll know more about what this is and what it's referring to. But already you can probably see that on the if statement there, it says steps.running.outcome. You can also see above in line 26 that the ID for that step that we want to know if it ran completely is called running. We actually set an ID here. So in line 32, we're doing that if statement and we're asking to return a variable that says steps running.outcome. And this outcome variable, it's a default thing that GitHub already has for us. If it does not, so exclamation point equals, if it does not equal success, we want this next step to run, okay? So if it does not complete successfully, we want this part to run, okay? And so if it fails, then, in other words, this part will run. And when it fails, what will happen here is that we have run. We have to put a little pipe in order to tell it that it's going to be a multi-step line, because the default is that it's going to just look for one line of code. So we have that little vertical line pipe to signify that it should look out for two steps, or two lines, I mean. And here we have, it's going to just echo the status back. So we're echoing it back. And then it is going to exit one. So that means it's just going to quit the job. And if it quits the GitHub job, we will be alerted to it by notifications, and as well as on the pull request screen, it'll tell us, hey, whoa, this failed. So that's actually a very important thing that we want to keep aware of. And we're going to talk more about this in later chapters. But sometimes when your GitHub action fails, it can do so silently. And we don't want it to fail silently. We want it to fail in a way that tells us that it failed so we can fix it. So this is what we're going to run in this chapter. And so please follow the exercise steps in order to run this yourself and see how it goes. All right. And see you in the next chapter.